Welcome to American Education FM, everybody. I'm Dr. Sean Brooks. Hello, ladies and gentlemen. Welcome back. I would like to start this particular episode by covering a very specific story that received zero attention. Not surprising either that it would receive zero attention. This should prove to people that we live in the United States of Israel, and that this, of course, is not a good thing. There are endless individuals, as we know, on the college campuses who, of course, were engaging in these protests and even showing up and stirring the pot, so to speak, and agitating individuals and doing whatever they could to sow division and discord and 1,000 other things. And, of course, we suspected Antifa as being a part of it, and clearly they were. We suspected other numerous individuals, of course, being associated with those campus protests, mixing themselves in with the so-called Free Palestine group, but also within the Jewish group as well. There were endless Jewish individuals who were wearing the kaifa scarves around their neck to make it look like they were pro-Palestinian, when in fact they weren't. They had the manufactured signs. They were all chanting in unison, trying to get the people who had no idea what the hell was going on to go along with them. This is the constant manipulation that exists. Not to mention, as far as Mossad is concerned, as a so-called Israeli intelligence agency, their entire motto is, quote, "By way of deception, thou shalt do war." So with that said, here's the particular story. On the campus of UCLA, there was at least 3 individuals, one specifically who this particular post hones in on, although, again, there were many of them, who were actual IDF agents, Israeli Defense Force agents. Again, these individuals were there clearly working on behalf of their own government on American soil, and they were there, of course, to engage in violence and manipulate the crowd and do a number of other different things. This is a war crime. There's really no other way to put it. I'm going to get into the specific law in just a minute, but let me bring up this specific story. This particular post was titled, "War Crimes. Israel Caught Sending Active Duty Servicemen to Brutally Attack Peaceful Protesters on U.S. Soil." It says CNN mentions Elran Bismuth's crimes, but not his name in extended report. I wonder why. And then they have the post, which, by the way, if you want to look at all of this information, I will link this in the description below of this episode. This is an excellent post, and whoever put this together did a very great job. It says, one fourth-year UCLA student who requested anonymity due to safety concerns told CNN that he was hit in the corner of his forehead with a traffic cone. Minutes later, video captured a counter-protester smashing a wood plank, it was a giant 2x4, onto the back of his head. With 2 deep cuts on his head, he said that he was rushed to the hospital and ultimately received 14 staples and 3 stitches for his injuries. Again, CNN hid the name of the Israeli agent. Now, the Israeli agent, the IDF agent, his name is Iraqi Bismuth. And they have, again, numerous clips of him, pictures of him, video of this guy doing this. There's facial recognition with a 99% chance that it is him, and it certainly is. The facial hair is exactly the same, the eyes, the nose, the ears. It's crystal clear it's him. And then it says, sending troops to our country to attack our people is an act of war. Doing so without declaring hostilities first is a war crime. It says, doing so perfidiously, out of uniform, and lacking insignia is a war crime. Targeting citizens is a war crime. The United States Congress is obligated to destroy Tel Aviv and bring these people to justice. Israeli soldiers attacked U.S. citizens in the night of April 30th and the morning of May 1st. They attacked unarmed protesters with baseball bats, metal pipes, plywood, 2x4s, bear spray, skunk spray, and of course their fists, causing serious bodily injury and almost killing one UCLA student. The name of one such IDF soldier was Iraqi Bismuth. He was in the U.S. not on a visa, but on a 90-day special visiting pass, quote-unquote, that allows Israelis to bypass visa requirements. He's an Israeli soldier who specifically came to the U.S. to attack American citizens and attempt to seriously injure or kill them. To make matters worse, the DA, the police chief, the FBI, every LEO is actively protecting these men after they so viciously and brazenly attempted to kill American citizens on live stream. There are no warrants out for their arrests. There is no ongoing investigation. The media is refusing to talk about it. Do not let this be memory hold. The victims want to press charges, but the LAPD, CHP, DA, FBI, among other law enforcement agencies, are refusing to open an investigation and issue a warrant for the arrest of Ilran Bismuth. Again, more video, more pictures. Why no charges, it says? Because Ilran Bismuth is not a U.S. citizen. He does not have a visa. He is an active duty serviceman in the Israeli military. His actions are an act of war, and because he targeted civilians, it is also a war crime on U.S. soil. They have a bonus clip here, a voicemail left on the phone of one of the Anons who first uncovered the IDF agents' identities. Various men who are seen attacking students with weapons throughout the following 5-hour live stream. That's on YouTube. They've been identified as Ilran Bismuth, Alon Abashur, Roni Abashur, Maitel Abashur, if I'm saying that right, Aviel Fatal, and who are all actively enlisted in the IDF. The cops stood down also, the U.S. Department of Justice and the State Department protecting the identified Israelis. Their goal is to scare protesters away and protect Biden's re-election polling. AI facial recognition uses the evergreen technology, and they're 99% certain they are who they are. Again, they have more videos of these individuals engaging in these actual attacks. And it goes on and on. It says, active duty military personnel of another nation attacking U.S. citizens on U.S. soil is a definition of an act of war. U.S. citizens supporting this is full legal definition of treason. It says, Jew terrorism is nothing new. Only thing new is on U.S. soil. Well, that's not true either. There's 9/11, of course. And Israeli quote-unquote art students packing the Twin Towers with explosives. So they've been doing this a very, very, very long time. But again, we know the connections to college and university campuses. We know that the Jewish lobby has control of a great many people. We know that the CIA is directly involved in those environments. And when you attend those environments and you see these things happening, you have to understand that there are endless agencies, all with their fingers in this cookie jar, and all stirring this pot at the exact same time. And now, of course, it's beyond evident that there are IDF soldiers on these campuses also doing what they can, certainly at the larger settings, not the smaller colleges necessarily, but certainly the larger ones that get more national attention. And they're actually doing what they're doing in an effort to ramp things up and make things far worse. Again, we have foreign soldiers on foreign land in our country, subverting our own government and our own institutions in broad daylight, in the open, and they're caught on camera and no one's prosecuting. This is not a country that's going to fix itself through an election. It just is not. This is not a country that's going to fix itself with the occasional arrest. Or, let's just all learn from the past and we'll do whatever we can to make sure that never happens again. No. There have to be expulsions of people. There have to be full-blown expulsions of individuals, and it has to be public. It has to be known to people. And if it isn't, nothing is going to change. This will continue to get worse. Again, I went over it in a previous episode. You had an adjunct female professor who was Jewish, I believe at the campus of Columbia University, if I'm not mistaken. And she, again, was directly involved with communicating with the NYPD via a Tel Aviv intelligence operation, which is Mossad, to basically tell the NYPD who to go after and when to go after them on that college campus. That's espionage. And it's been normalized. Now let's look at least one U.S. code here. 18 U.S. Code subsection 794. Gathering or delivering defense information to aid foreign government. Here's what it says. This is from Cornell Law School, law.cornell.edu. Legal Information Institute. It says the following. Their A definition is this, quote, whoever with intent or reason to believe that it is to be used to the injury of the United States or to the advantage of a foreign nation communicates, delivers, or transmits or attempts to communicate, deliver, or transmit to any foreign government or to any faction or party or military or naval force within a foreign country, whether recognized or unrecognized by the United States, or to any representative, office, agent, employee, subject, or citizen thereof, either directly or indirectly. Any document, writing, code, book, signal book, sketch, photograph, photographic negative, blueprint, map, plan, model, note, instrument, appliance, or information relating to the national defense shall be punishable by death or by imprisonment for any term of years or for life, except that the sentence of death shall not be imposed unless the injury, or if there is no injury, the court further finds that the offense resulted in the identification by a foreign power as defined in Section 101A of the Foreign Intelligence Surveillance Act of 1978, of an individual acting as an agent of the United States, and consequently in the death of that individual or directly concerned nuclear weaponry, military spacecraft or satellites, early warning systems or other means of defense or retaliation against large-scale attack, war plans, communications intelligence, or cryptographic information, or any other major weapon systems or major element of defense strategy. That's a mouthful, and it's certainly a lot. But again, we can assume that these individuals who are working for the IDF and Israeli intelligence are not just running around with 2x4s hitting people, but they're reporting back to someone. Whatever it is that they did, whoever it is that they communicated with, again, they're seeking to destroy America from the inside, not just with demoralization, but certainly with division and all of the other methods that they seek to destroy our country. This is being allowed. All of this is being allowed. It goes on here. Here's their B definition. Whoever in time of war, with intent that the same shall be communicated to the enemy, collects, records, publishes, or communicates, or attempts to elicit any information with respect to the movement, numbers, description, condition, or disposition of any armed forces, ships, aircraft, or war materials of the United States, or with respect to the plans or conduct, or supported plans or conduct of any naval or military operations, or with respect to any works or measures undertaken for or connected with or intended for the fortification or defense of any place, or any other information relating to the public defense which might be useful to the enemy, shall be punished by death or by imprisonment for any term of years or for life. That was the B definition. Here's the C definition. If two or more persons conspire to violate this section, and one or more of such persons do any act to effect the object of the conspiracy, each of the parties to such conspiracy shall be subject to the punishment provided for the offense which is the object of such conspiracy. There's also a D definition here, and it says the following. Any person convicted of the violation of this section shall forfeit to the United States, irrespective of any provision of state law, any property constituting or derived from any proceeds the person obtained directly or indirectly as the result of such violation, and any of the person's property used or intended to be used in any manner or part to commit or to facilitate the commission of such violation. For the purposes of this subsection, the term state includes state of the United States, District of Columbia, or any Commonwealth territory or possession of the United States. And it goes blah, 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 blah. Again, they get to confiscate any of their property, take all their money, do whatever they do. The United States government then owns it, and this individual is either put to death or they are imprisoned for X amount of years, if not life. And that's just one law. And that usually, again, has to do with communicating something back and forth from person to person, which, again, is my definition of espionage. At the exact same time, what do you call it when a foreign government and members of a foreign military are on American soil in a foreign land, physically assaulting and battering American citizens? Again, is that not an act of war? If it happens overseas, everybody loses their minds. But if it's a Jew and it happens to be on American soil here, in particular on a college campus, assaulting potentially minors, well, then it's allowed. And then law enforcement works with these individuals to hide them. The media, of course, hides them. Depending on the size of the college or the university, I mean, you have to assume that certain administrators are aware of this and other administrators have no idea. Certainly the students have no idea, by and large. Some of them do, some of them don't. This is all part of the purposeful deception that takes place within these environments. I would take it a step further, of course, and sort of like I said earlier, I mean, we have to assume that the size of the university matters. Yes, the bigger ones, the ones that always make the news, these are the ones that are going to be infiltrated, and the pot is going to be stirred at a level that it wouldn't certainly on a smaller campus. And that's just kind of the way that it is these days. Because again, a smaller college or university just isn't going to get the press. They're not going to get the attention. Even if a student were to die, there wouldn't be nearly the attention. In fact, the story would probably even be buried. But it would have to happen on a larger campus like UCLA, Harvard, Stanford, or Columbia. It'd have to be one of those by and large. And as we know, those were the ones that garnered the most attention here this past spring regarding all of the quote-unquote anti-Semitic attacks and what are we going to do and don't you denounce anti-Semitism. I mean, all of that nonsense was taking place on those larger campuses. That should be a giant spotlight and a giant red flag to anybody that you had better now know going forward that the IDF is located on those campuses, that they are there, they are sent there purposefully by the Israeli government to agitate, stir the pot, assault, batter, if not kill, in order to, again, get whatever outcome they want, which we know is more division, more chaos, more turmoil, whatever word you want to use. It's all of that. But these are war crimes. And no one is talking about this. Nobody. CNN wouldn't even touch it with a 10-foot pole. They wouldn't go beyond a singular interview with a person. But don't worry again, Laura Ingraham will have Jewish students on Fox News talking about, how they're all victimized all the time. And that photograph of all the, American boys holding up the American flag as it was being taken down allegedly during a particular protest, that most of those boys were Jewish. And, God bless the Jewish students and they never do anything wrong and blah, blah, blah. Everyone has no idea that they're all being manipulated. And as the documentary The Jewish Lobby very specifically points out, Jewish students are targeted by Mossad and the IDF to sow the discord, to find their way onto the likes of Fox News, to tell their stories, whether they be real or not, and most of them are not real stories. They're completely fabricated. And they do it because they know that if they're seen on the old TV and people watch it, then they'll just blindly believe it. Again, I've said it before, and it's certainly in the Q posts, and it's 100% right. This is the infiltration instead of invasion. Both are taking place now. There's no doubt about that, but this is the infiltration aspect of this. There's another aspect of this too, which I think is interesting, and it's remarkably unfortunate because it's something that just will never happen. You will never see this. After a particular episode like this, what you will never get is you will never get someone like me or someone like you who is knowledgeable on this subject, who knows that this is happening. You'll never get them to actually show up on a college or university campus and speak to these individuals about what really goes on in these environments and teach them about the sick underbelly and the manipulation of all of these protests. Again, you've heard me say here on the show before the blatant hypocrisy of them protesting over this issue, which of course is a massive genocide for the purpose of a land grab, for the purpose of redistributing the land and repurposing the land, rather, for a variety of different reasons: trade routes, money, child trafficking, whatever it may be, drug running, you name it. Military, who knows? It's probably all of it at the exact same time, but you're never going to get anybody explaining the hypocrisy either of them protesting that, and yet they don't protest their own erosion of their own rights on their own college campus in their own homeland of America. They won't leave class, walk out of class, and protest the mask wearing. No. They all believe that. They won't walk out of class and protest the shot taking. Nope, they're not going to do that either. But bombs go off in a foreign country. They all get on the same script, they all get on the same schedule, and then somebody says, okay, lights, camera, action, and then everybody goes out and they just do this. Again, these colleges and universities across the United States signed up for these protests back in November. There was already a predetermined list. I've put that list out on Gab. I brought it up on the show. This is the way that it is. They all signed up for it. Some of the protests were 12 students, and some of them were thousands and thousands of them, and everything in between. It wasn't the small ones that received the attention per se. It was the much larger ones. But again, how open do you think university students, let alone professors and administrators, would be to having an individual who is knowledgeable on this subject show up and explain to them what the Jewish lobby and what foreign governments have in store for college and university campuses? Would they listen to such a presentation? Probably not. Again, the only, I'm trying to Walter Mitty this myself. I would think that the only unifying factor in such a presentation would be much like what we've all experienced over the last 4 years, and certainly way before then, regarding any false flag for that matter, is that you would have to explain to everybody in the room, including the people shouting you down and claiming that you're a white supremacist and you're the enemy and blah, blah, blah. All that name calling, you would have to look at everybody and say, wait a minute. Everybody's been lied to here. Everybody's being manipulated. It isn't just me. It's not just you. I'm just showing up and telling you that this happens. That you have 3-letter agencies manipulating people on your college and university campus, and they're using you as pawns in this chess game. And you're going along with it without even thinking, because you don't know how deep the rabbit hole goes. Everybody's being used. And then, of course, like I said earlier, you'd have to bring up the hypocrisy of them not protesting the mask wearing and the shot taking and a million other issues that are happening right underneath their noses, and they have absolutely no idea. So I just want to lay this out one last time. I'm sure I'll bring it up again, but thankfully, people have graduated. College and universities are closing their doors for the summer by and large, and the protests are going away. And in fact, they're practically non-existent now. But you're going to continue to see the hypocrisy of the likes of Con Inc. and Gateway Pundit and Real America's Voice and Charlie Kirk and all these other nitwits. None of them covered that story. The one that I just mentioned here with IDF soldiers on college campuses stirring the pot, physically battering and assaulting random people. This is a foreign government and foreign military on our soil physically attacking Americans. And they're Jewish. And no one's touching it with a 10-foot pole. That right there should tell everybody that this is the United States of Israel. It's disgusting. Where's Tim Pool on this issue? And his band of vitamin D deficient nitwits. Where are they? Where are all those pale weirdos on this subject? They're nowhere to be found. Nowhere. That should also tell you who your enemy is. Where's Patrick Bet David on this one? Is he covering this issue? Has he covered the fact that IDF soldiers are on college campuses assaulting and battering as actual active duty soldiers? For the purposes, again, of manipulation, if not straight up murder, and certainly controlling the narrative and playing the victim and lying and doing all of the things that they do. Are they covering any of this? How about Joe Rogan? Anybody bringing this up? This is a huge problem. It's the problem. And without extreme accountability, as Stu Peters continuously says, and he gets plenty of things wrong all of the time too, but without public extreme exposure and accountability, ladies and gentlemen, this thing known as America is done. It's over. Unless we get rid of this problem permanently and arrest all of the people associated with it. There's already laws on the books that say you can't do it, but laws don't mean jack shit if nobody's going to enforce anything. That right there is how you destroy a country. You get a hold of the judiciary, you get a hold of so-called law enforcement, and then you just refuse to do your job. You're paid off to not do it. We're seeing that everywhere. And notice the words that people are using. They're calling it lawfare. See, the term lawfare gets used all of the time now, doesn't it? All these terms that get used and normalized, and they're used and normalized in particular on Con Inc., on the Con Inc. side of things, certainly. Yes, the left uses it also, but it's the far left, it's the Bolsheviks that are the ones that are actually creating all of these terms. They get together in boardrooms, they scheme, they meddle, they do what they do, they go around the horn, and then they say, okay, well, what are we going to do? What are we going to call this? Cancel culture is another one. I've been over this on the show before. It's not cancel culture, it's Bolshevism. This is all Bolshevism. These are all the tactics and the tools that exist in the toolbox of a Bolshevik. And lawfare, quote unquote, is one of them. It's Bolshevism. That's all that it is. You control the judiciary. You control prosecutors and law enforcement. We know for a fact NYPD is directly in bed with Mossad and intelligence agencies, quote unquote, in Tel Aviv. This has been proven beyond a reasonable doubt, which means one of the largest law enforcement agencies is not only Jewish, but they're completely corrupt. But don't forget to back the blue, and NYPD's the greatest police force, and blah, 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 blah. And all those Con Inc. talking points, none of that's real. None of it. They're all pawns in a game, and they're all being used whether they know it or not. And they're all being paid off to not do their jobs. This is how you destroy a country. There's another way you destroy it, shifting gears slightly here now. Although, again, still in the same avenue. You probably saw this at the end of last week, that the United States government put out a warning to all LGBTQXYZ weirdos, saying that attacks are likely to come against all of you, so be prepared. And this particular story, again, is from the BBC. Again, same story, but it says U.S. warns of possible Pride Month attacks worldwide. Well, gosh, isn't that interesting? It's not going to be us attacking the weirdos who want to cut their genitals off. If they want to do that, that's their business. What this is about increasing a police presence during all these fag parades that are going to exist all over the United States. Next month, certainly. And then creating a false flag attack and then blaming it on somebody who really had nothing to do with it. This has a Boston fake bombing written all over it. By the way, if you're unaware, that entire thing was fake. They had a bunch of amputees set up over on the side and then an explosion goes off that doesn't actually hurt anybody other than ring their ears a little bit. Fake blood around on top of an amputee. They carry these people away, and then they go and arrest a couple of individuals who were set up to create such a distraction. And, we've got bombs here in the United States in backpacks, so we need to go after more Arabs and whoever else, IDF soldiers, although they wouldn't identify them as such. Certainly not CIA agents or individuals working for the CIA. And then what, of course, does Hollywood do after such an event? They create an entire movie about it starring Mark Wahlberg. Isn't that convenient? The same thing will happen here. They're setting this up again for just more false attacks. They could be real, they could be fake, but who they blame it on, I'm telling you, this right here, this is just another play in the playbook during an election year. It's the same kind of thing. Again, if you thought that the Black Lives Matter rallies under the fake death of George Floyd and the fake reasons behind his death, if you thought that was weird and that was chaotic, wrap your head around this one. Wrap your head around there being a false flag attack at a gay pride parade. Someone gets killed, or doesn't, but people are led to believe that someone gets killed. They blame it on an Arab, or they blame it on, a Christian white individual. And then before you know it, instead of blacks taking to the streets to burn things to the ground, you have rainbow flag-wearing dominatrix and drag queens with rubber strap-ons running after people at full speed. I mean, you talk about a zombie apocalypse. Holy Lord. Not to mention how many police are going to want to arrest half-naked people. Half-naked people who are protesting dressed up like dogs and cats. With, their children in tow, because we got to teach the kids what to do. This is an interesting avenue of thought here. This is going to get weird. I think this has the potential to get rather weird. So again, here's what the article from the BBC says. Now again, it's the BBC. It's their job to push evil propaganda, and we know that. But let's just take this into consideration. Again, authorities warned U.S. citizens, it says, abroad to exercise increased caution, quote unquote. Stay alert in locations frequented by tourists, including pride celebrations, a warning issued by the State Department said. Came out on Friday, issued by U.S. law enforcement agencies. The Federal Bureau of Investigation and Department of Homeland Security said foreign terror organizations or terrorist organizations or supporters may seek to exploit increased gatherings associated with the upcoming June 2024 Pride Month, quote unquote. It says no specific gatherings or locations were mentioned in the warnings. The law enforcement agencies noted that messages from the Islamic State group distributed in English in February of 2023 included rhetoric against LGBTQI+ events and venues. Ladies and gentlemen, if the FBI and Department of Homeland Security are warning people about particular things, it usually means that they're behind it. They're the ones that are behind it. They're involved. They're not just taking these random threats that someone online said, which was probably one of their own employees, in order to, again, motivate their own working environment to put out a warning to then set up some false flag. I mean, it's these agencies themselves that are behind this. There's no doubt about it. And in their warning, they're already, again, blaming the Islamic State. That's their scapegoat here. That's exactly who they're pinning this on, and nothing's even happened yet. It said it's no surprise that neo-Nazis and jihadists often express mutual admiration for their shared anti-gay visions, says Mark D. Wallace, the project's chief executive, said in a statement. And he's apparently the head of the Counter-Extremism Project, which is a New York-based nonprofit group. Yes, there you go. So he gets to name who the enemy is, and he gets to name it to three-letter agencies in the United States government, and the United States government just believes this person. And then that's it. Of course, they reference the Pulse gay nightclub in Orlando, Florida, back in June of 2016, which I don't even think that was real. I think that entire thing was fake also. It's just amazing. It's absolutely amazing. So here's their plan, ladies and gentlemen. Buckle up. It's not going to be Black Lives Matter taking to the streets. No, no, no. It's going to be rubber dildos and drag queens. And of course, it's going to be probably the IDF that pokes the bear, so to speak, and creates some false flag attack with the help of the FBI and the CIA. And then once all of that happens, well, who's going to get blamed? An Arab or a so-called white supremacist. And then a lockdown of some kind, and there you go. Because you have to keep in mind, it is this week, as it turns out, that the so-called WHO pandemic treaty is going to be voted on behind closed doors, and we know how that's going to shape out before it's even happened. So, hey, sprinkle a little gay violence on the streets, a little manufactured event from our own government and three-letter agencies, of course with the help of the IDF, because who else would help us? And then you mix that in with some kind of a fake illness or cranking up 5G. Aren't things getting fun? Aren't they getting interesting? Again, I've said it a million times, and I'm going to move on to education stuff because I could just keep yelling about this and ranting about it. But if we don't see things visually change, if we don't have individuals consistently calling out the real enemy in the future, this country will not last. It will be the slow imprisonment of all of us. There's no doubt about it. It's already happening. I've already been over the House bill. What was that, 6090? That entire quote-unquote anti-Semitism thing and blah, 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 and your rhetoric is anti-Semitic, so we can decide whether or not you should be fined or imprisoned for your constant hate speech and XYZ. The enemy is looking for a reason. They're just always looking for a reason. Now, again, we have the numbers. There's no doubt about it. We have the guns, we have the numbers. I'm not worried from that standpoint. What I am worried about, or at least I should say ruminating about from time to time, are the individuals who just refuse to call out the enemy for who they are and where they are and what they're capable of doing. That's why they're the enemy too, because they have so many good people tricked into not knowing how they actually operate and what they influence and what they manipulate. And because they play the entire manipulative game, and they play it very well. They've tricked people into actually believing that if you criticize them, then there's something wrong with you. That if you think that they're involved in any way with things that are going on that are negative in our country of America, well, then there's something wrong with you. But isn't that sort of the dead giveaway that they're involved? Isn't that the dead giveaway that they are the ones that are responsible for sowing the seeds of discord, so to speak? I think so. I'm pretty sure that's the dead giveaway. Now I'm going to move on to more specific education-related stories here, and I've got a few headlines and a few of these stories that I want to dive into. Some of this is not good, but I do end, rather, with a story that has potential. And it, again, is jab-related, and it has to do with a Colorado court ruling that universities imposing the shots on people was a bad thing and completely unconstitutional. Now, of course, this could be a very good thing in the future, but time will tell. Either way, let me start off with this. This is from the Washington Examiner here. And it was titled, "A Federal Court Just Took a Sledgehammer to Parental Rights." It says the U.S. Fourth Circuit Court of Appeals issued a ruling on Wednesday in a case arising from Montgomery County, Maryland, that will have a broad and devastating implications for parental rights. It says in a 2-to-1 ruling, a 3-judge panel ruled that parents who send their children to school in the Maryland County are not entitled to a religious exemption allowing them to opt their children out of certain lessons involving LGBT content. says the majority was written by a George W. Bush appointed judge who was joined by a Biden appointee. An appointee of former President Donald Trump dissented in the case. It says the lawsuit was brought by a coalition of parents of various faith backgrounds who objected to a series of LGBT storybooks in elementary school classrooms, and the school district had granted an opt-out for such lessons but withdrew it in 2023. After a district court ruled against the parents, an appeal was brought to the Fourth Circuit, which affirmed the lower court ruling. Okay. I'm not going to read the rest of it. It's pretty self-explanatory. Here's the hypocritical part about this. I find this interesting that a religious group would bring this to a public school, knowing what public school environments are all about, and yet the religious group, who knows that these environments are degenerate, refuse to pull children out, or their own children out of these environments and bankrupt them. As I've said a million times, that's the fastest way to destroy these environments. You leave them. Yes, you can sue them, and yes, you can play all these political games, or you can end them in the blink of an eye, in a snap of your fingers, just by leaving. Again, this is the Matrix. These people do not know what they don't know. And they don't know that they can leave, graduate from high school early online using homeschooling curriculums. They can graduate from college early, as Luther Smith brought up in the last episode with his own daughter. AJ Gochik has brought it up on this show with his own son, same thing. They can graduate with college credit at the age of 16. They can finish college by the time they're 18. They have a degree. They can go and do whatever they'd like after that. They have no idea the time and energy that they are wasting as families engaging in these lawsuits and these back and forths to get rid of the gay Jewish books that exist in libraries. They just exist. I saw this too. I saw this last week. Again, I found it remarkably ironic and very stereotypical and just pathetic, to be honest, because the hypocrisy is overwhelming. There is a Hispanic woman running for Congress. I don't know the state. My apologies. It could be New Jersey, but I could have that wrong. And in this ad, she's walking around with guns, the stereotypical conservative with a gun kind of thing, and that's fine. I don't have a problem with that. You want to carry a gun in an ad, in your political ad, be my guest. But then she puts up a couple of gay books on an oil drum, or what, I don't know what it was. It was a block of wood, whatever. And then she has just one of those teeny little handheld flamethrowers. And she goes, when I become, oh yeah, what was it? I'm sorry. She wasn't running to be a congresswoman. She was running to be the Secretary of State. And again, my apologies, I forget the state. Again, it could have been Indiana for all I know. I'm not entirely sure. But she takes the torch to these gay books. And I thought, yeah, good for you. Just like all the college students and all the minors and all the adults did back in Germany in the 1930s. For that 1 to 2 days when they were allowed to burn all those gay books. Remember that? I mean, I thought to myself, what an opportunity for a history lesson. But no, because who's funding her campaign? The Jewish lobby. That's who's funding her campaign. She's making it sound like she's attacking the thing that they support without calling it them and saying it's them that are supporting it. But she's receiving clear funds, obviously, from someone, some political action group, to, again, play the Marjorie Taylor Greene, I'll carry a gun, that means I'm pro-Second Amendment, and I'll torch these gay books, because that's exactly what needs to happen in all these schools, and I'll make sure that they don't exist in, XYZ. Yeah, it's pornography. The simple fact that pornography exists in American K-12 libraries, I mean, there's already laws on the books against that. And as I said earlier in this episode, well, what's that mean? What's that mean when there's already laws on the books and no one enforces any of it? So we have to look, my point with that story is this. We have to look past the political gimmicks that these people engage in and see the blatant hypocrisy at face value. It's beyond embarrassing. But for God's sakes, pull your children out of school. Stop playing these legal games. It doesn't do anything. It just wastes your time and energy that you could engage with your own children and having a much healthier relationship with them in a far healthier environment. Here's a healthy environment. I'm being sarcastic. This is from the New York Post. This is also from last week. Florida elementary school principal choked and beat student with a cable in shocking caught-on-camera assault. Now again, I didn't see him beat him with a cable, but in this particular video, and the man is black, a Dante Akeem Prophet, the principal at Destiny Leadership Academy in Ocala, Florida, which is in Marion County, again, 33 years old, was caught swatting the boy with a charging cable hard enough for the student to fall over. He pins himself on top of the student. He's pulling the student, yanking him around. He sits on top of the student. He's got the student subdued with his legs and his hands. Again, all of this is on camera. They arrest the guy later that evening, as everything, of course, has been caught on footage. And wouldn't you know it, I think it was 2019, he was convicted of child molestation. So again, if somebody says, well, charter schools are better and private schools are better, ladies and gentlemen, they don't have the vetting processes that are in place that would exist in another environment. I'm not saying any of these environments are good. Clearly they are not. But at the exact same time, how is it that a child predator, a convicted child molester, allegedly, becomes a school principal of a quote-unquote academy? And more times than not, and I've said this on the show before, but more times than not, when you hear the term academy associated with an educational institution, quote-unquote, the term academy is directly associated with either low-income minorities or students with serious discipline issues and or criminal records. Again, more times than not, that's usually the case, but again, what are the odds that a alleged arrested and or convicted child molester would become the so-called principal of such a school? Again, this sort of brings back to that Senate bill that I brought up last week in an episode here in the state of Ohio. I think it was last Wednesday, where again, the public school apparatus is claiming that by lowering the standards of who schools hire and who they can hire, that's going to actually filter out employees and even students out of the public system and thrust them into the private or charter school system. This may be true, but at the exact same time, they're all just three heads on the same snake. It's not necessarily that one environment is better than the other. The vetting process really has to be done by parents. I fully understand that there are excellent private schools that are very small, and they vet all of their employees. They make sure that they all have the necessary credentials, no criminal backgrounds. They have them engage in a background check, drug tests, the whole thing. They teach classical curriculum, all of that. I know that those schools exist. I'm just saying that they're few and far between. And to paint with a wide brush and say that, well, all charter schools and all private schools are all the cat's pajamas and they're far better than public schools, that's not entirely true. So again, just kind of keep that in mind, certainly in this case with that school principal. So there you go. Okay, here's another one. Washington Examiner again. Why are Fairfax County Public Schools trying to groom our children? Is the question that's being asked in this headline. I don't think I have to read this article, do I? Again, I hate to just read the headline, but I think we know why. I think we know. This is the agenda. This is the Jewish lobby's agenda in American education. It's to normalize perversion. Because ultimately, down the line, what's the long-term goal? Legalizing having sex with kids. That's the long-term goal. That's what love is love means. All those weirdos who had that love is love sign in their front yard, they're being manipulated by the Jewish lobby with the phrases and the words and the multiple meanings and the dual meanings, and they have no idea what they're actually supporting. Here's another one. Kind of good news on this front. This is from insiderpaper.com. England sets to ban gender identity teaching in school. Well, good. It says children up to the age of 18 at schools in England will not be taught gender identity under government proposals published Thursday, it says, amid growing concern in the UK and elsewhere about transgender issues. The move follows a landmark review which last month urged extreme caution, quote unquote, on prescribing hormone treatments for young people grappling with gender identity issues. No, it's not gender identity issues. It's just called puberty. And when you mix that with a bunch of inoculations that alter a person's DNA, and you then combine that with a society that normalizes these perversions, well, you're going to confuse the ever-living hell out of a kid. But fortunately, this is being rolled back apparently due to inappropriate content and the toxic debate and increase in suicides and a number of other things. So, got to take the wins where they exist, I suppose, but that would be a small win there. Here's another one. It's very stereotypical. Cicely sent this my way. This is hilarious. I believe there's some audio to go with this as well. In fact, there is. This is from KOAT.com, Action News 7. 15 guns found at Albuquerque public schools this school year. It says, according to BCSO, a West Mesa High student was arrested for bringing a gun onto campus, while under the influence of alcohol last Monday. So this is fun, and what's even funnier, as Cicely pointed out, was the statement by the West Mesa High School principal. I'm going to read the statement first and then play the audio. Here's what they said. This is from their principal, Michelle Torres. Letter to the community, and this was back on March 13th. Dear West Mesa High School families, today I must address an unfortunate incident that took place on our campus. I'm deeply saddened to inform you that a gun was confiscated from a student. First and foremost, here it comes, I want to reassure you that the student found in possession of the gun did not express any intentions of harming himself or others. However, I must stress that the presence of any weapon on school grounds is a serious violation of our policies. As a consequence, it says the student responsible for bringing the gun onto campus will face disciplinary measures up to and including expulsion and prosecution. Well, they'd better. It says, I want to thank the student who alerted us to the firearm. It's proof that our see something, say something messaging is working. Ah, yes. You see, they have to take credit, don't they? They have to take credit in a situation where they had absolutely no idea what was going on. And no, it's not your see something, say something message that's working. It's not your policy that's working. It was an individual who was raised correctly, who heard something that was suspicious, and then reported it because they did the right thing because they're a good human. That's not your doing. That's clearly something that's working within the family. But sure, school, go ahead and take as much credit as humanly possible. Said, I would also like to express my gratitude for the swift response and effective de-escalation exhibited by the Albuquerque Public School and Police Department, which promptly handled the situation. And I want to thank the Albuquerque Police Department for its prompt response. Incidents like this heighten anxieties within our school community. We recognize the impact such events can have on both our students and staff. I encourage all members of our community to take advantage of the counseling resources available to help navigate these challenging times. I'm going to keep reading, but do you hear the way that these people talk? I mean, it's like they copy each other's letters over and over and over again. Clearly, this principal didn't write this. This was written by their PR director. And it's just a cut and paste. It's the same thing that every school district puts out in any situation like this. But don't worry, the best part's coming up here in just a second. It says it is crucial, rather, for everyone to remain vigilant and promptly report any suspicious activity or concerns. Your watchfulness and willingness to speak up play an integral role in maintaining a safe and secure environment for our students and staff. Here it comes. Quote, please rest assured that the safety and well-being of our students and staff are paramount. Every reported threat will be treated with the utmost seriousness, and we will do everything within our power to ensure their protection. It's so exhausting. They don't even hear themselves talk anymore. They just don't even hear themselves. Endless people were murdered today, and schools closed down, and everybody's sick and dying, but the safety and security of well-being is our number one concern. It does not matter what goes on in these environments. In all of these letters, they seek to take credit for everything. They pat themselves on the back constantly. They might give the occasional thanks to an agency or a student or a person, but then it's just bruising their own back as they pat themselves on the back. And then remind everybody, don't worry, these places are safe. Yes, there were guns around, but still safe. Okay, it wraps up and says, should you have any concerns or questions, please don't hesitate to contact me. I am here to listen and address any worries you may have, unquote. Oh, I'm sure you are. Here's the media outlet audio with this in 3, 2, 1.
Another gun found at West Mesa High School on Monday.
Just yesterday, John Allen was over there speaking at West Mesa, talking about the dangers of guns to kids. And literally a short time later, a kid is discovered with a gun on.
The principal sending this letter to parents saying, quote, I am deeply saddened to inform you that a gun was confiscated from a student. But this is not the first time. 2 guns were found on school grounds back in October. Both students taken into custody.
The students today were arrested. The district attorney has taken a zero tolerance stance, and they will be prosecuted.
Another West Mesa High student's gun firing off inside of a classroom back in December 2022. APS Acting Superintendent Gabriella Blakey having this to say when we asked of safety measures.
Do you feel like metal detectors are just completely out of the question at this point?
There's mixed reviews on metal detectors, and because they're mixed, I don't think that we have a yes or no answer to it, but we continue to look at all the different ways that we can negate bringing any violence to our campuses.
Bernalillo County District Attorney Sam Bregman enforcing a zero-tolerance anti-gun initiative just last year, actively speaking with schools on gun violence.
I think there's one big thing that I really want to see take place, and I don't think the special session's a long enough time. We have to revamp the Children's Code. Because of the Children's Code, the way it's made up, kids are not being held accountable for bad conduct. There's never any consequences until it's far too late, until there is an incident with a gun on campus, or God forbid, a young person actually using a gun in a crime.
Former U.S. Attorney Damon Martinez telling us de-escalation is crucial. He faces Bregman for the DA seat at next month's primary.
We also have to go after the supply. They can get them very easily. And we don't know how to de-escalate as a community, as a society. And so they turn to a gun in certain situations when you should be able to know how to de-escalate that. In other words, a fight that used to be with words or possibly fists is now turning into a gunfight.
And of course, it's also the stereotypical election year political battle with guns and gun confiscation and tracking and 1,000 other things. And then, of course, you take minors and the school environment and you throw all of that together, and there's your debate talking point. Just the same old recycled talking point over and over and over again. It's unbelievable. Statistically speaking, ladies and gentlemen, the vast majority of students who bring guns to school are blacks and Hispanics. In particular, if the environment tends to be majority black and or Hispanic. This is a fact. And why do they do it? They do it for a variety of reasons. Some of it, again, is because they actually think that they need to carry a gun in school for protection and for protection purposes against other individuals who happen to be Black and or Hispanic. And a lot of this, of course, is gang-related or wannabe, so to speak, gang-related. These are wannabe gangsters. And so they carry a gun because, they want to flex their muscles, or they want to flash a gun, or they want to make it look like they're tough, or, you're not going to pick on me because I've got a gun and I'll flash that gun and you won't touch me and blah, blah, blah. It's such low IQ nonsense, and it's beyond terrible. In fact, even in the video there, with the associated audio that you just heard, one of the individuals held up the old gun-free zone sign, because those work. Don't worry, this is a gun-free zone, and if you're carrying a gun, understand that there's a sign outside that says you can't do the thing you're doing. Again, just take a deep breath for a minute and sit back and think for a moment about those environments, and then, of course, think about all the individuals who never attend those environments. And think then, I should say, just ask yourself the very basic question, who do you think is going to be more healthy-minded? Who do you think is going to be more civil? Who do you think is going to learn more accurate information? Is it the individuals going to these public school environments where guns are being confiscated on a constant basis, or is it going to be any other environment? In particular, in a home environment where they have the freedom to look up copious amounts of information without restriction and even learn about those very environments that perhaps they once attended and how unsafe they are. So you can learn about danger without being in danger. This is a thing. Anybody can do this, and minors can do this too. But unfortunately, the Matrix has such a grip on so many people that they literally believe that those environments, even where guns are being confiscated with regularity, are the only places that they can send their kids to school. This is the only way that they can learn. It's absurd. And people have got to get over that. They've got to shake that mentality. Because again, they operate also under the false belief that, well, nothing bad will ever happen to my child. I'll keep sending them to these schools where these guns are being confiscated, but nothing bad will happen to my kid. Of course, that's what everybody thinks until something terrible happens, and then, they have egg on their face and a dead kid. It's a horrible situation, but yeah, it's just the cognitive dissonance is constantly in play here. Okay, jab-related things. Let me mention this too, just as a brief segue and kind of an overall point. I feel sort of the need right now to make mention of this. I want to make this abundantly clear when it comes to this show and the stories and the things that I bring up here. I don't bring them up to depress people. That's not the point. I don't bring things up to make things hopeless for everybody. That's not the point either. Awareness is vigilance. Vigilance is education. And vigilance and education can bring a great deal of peace. So that's sort of the bridge that I'm crossing here. That's the bridge that I'm building. I'm not, I'm not bringing this stuff up to make people sad or depressed or whatever. I hope that it motivates individuals, and I hope that it makes people aware. And if it motivates people and it makes people aware and they make better decisions and choose a different path for themselves and the people around them and their own children, perfect. That's really the point. So here's a particular story I think that may get some legs. It might. Time will tell. Again, I don't trust the judicial system on much of this, but if some people in positions of so-called influence here, certainly from a legal standpoint, can have a positive say, well, that sets a precedent, and then the floodgates can open. This was from dailycitizen.focusonthefamily.com, and it was titled, University of Colorado Vax Mandate Ruled Unconstitutional. It says the 10th Circuit Court of Appeals ruled that the University of Colorado's expansive COVID-19 vaccine mandate unconstitutional earlier this month, calling it religious animus. The background is that 17 students and employees at the University of Colorado's Anschutz Medical campus, if I'm saying that right, sued the school for religious discrimination in the fall of 2021. The plaintiffs argued that the school violated their First Amendment rights by selectively denying their religious objection to the COVID-19 vaccine. The District Court for the District of Colorado ruled against the anonymous plaintiffs twice, once on October 25th of 2021 and again on January 27th of 2022. Thomas More Society and Telios Law appealed the case against the University of Colorado to the 10th Circuit in March of 2022. The court handed down their favorable 55-page ruling on May 7th of this year. The issue, it says the University of Colorado Anschutz Medical Campus released 2 discriminatory COVID-19 vaccine policies in September of 2021. The first policy required all students, employees, and individuals who, quote, currently or may in the future access any CU Anschutz faculty or participate in any CU Anschutz program, regardless of location, to get vaccinated. The next one says it forced those requesting religious exemptions to submit to extensive questioning about their beliefs. And the third one granted religious exemptions only to those whose faiths forbid all vaccines as determined by the school. It says under this initial policy, Anschutz denied religious exemptions to Roman Catholics, Eastern Orthodox Christians, Buddhists, evangelical Christians, and non-denominational Protestant Christians, but provided them to Christian Scientists and Jehovah's Witnesses. Again, it's amazing. It's amazing. You heard me bring up again the use of discretion as a result of this whole exemption nonsense. And the very fact that these exemptions even existed opened the floodgates to discretion being used and how that in itself is discriminatory. It really makes you wonder who the lawyers are for these institutions. They're all morons. All of them. It says when the school was threatened with litigation, leaders introduced a new policy, forbidding all students from seeking religious exemptions, though they could continue to seek medical exemptions, and then granting religious exemptions to employees provided that they did not pose, quote, undue hardships to the university. Now, the ruling here, it says the following. It says, Judges Allison Eade and Jerome Holmes found the University of Colorado and Anschutz guilty of violating 3 legal principles. A school receiving federal funding cannot punish employees based solely on their religious beliefs, determine the authenticity of an employee's belief by deciding whether it perceives the employee's doctrine to be coherent or legitimate, quote unquote. And then the last one was create policies making secular exemptions easier to get than religious ones. Yeah, you can't do that. Again, we thought that was common sense. We thought that that was just the way that the law existed in the first place. But when you have to remind individuals who are in the business of being legally sound to actually be legally sound, then you have a massive problem. This is incredible. I mean, this is an excellent ruling, but this again should open the floodgates, you would think. It says, for violating these principles, the judges found Anschutz's policy likely violated the free exercise and established clause of the First Amendment. No shit. And the corresponding rights incorporated against the states by the 14th Amendment. No duh. I mean, this is a no duh moment. It says further, the ruling declared that the school's policies motivated by religious animus, or, quote, hostility to certain religions, unquote. It then says in bold here, the administration has not even attempted to explain why its interest is served by granting exemptions to practitioners of some religions but not others. No one contends that Christian scientists are less likely to contract or to spread COVID-19 than Buddhists or Roman Catholics or Orthodox Christians. Joke's on everybody. There is no COVID. Oopsie. It doesn't even exist. It says, to paraphrase a prior opinion of this court, the administration's policy does not stop exemptions, it says, for religious beliefs. It only stops exemptions for religious beliefs the administration deems inconsistent. Of course. Of course they did. That was the whole point. You offer up a medical or religious exemption. You fill out both. You say, I don't want to take these shots. You list all the reasons why in the medical exemptions because of all of the alleged ingredients that are in the shots. You prove, allegedly, that you have a religious affiliation, even though you may not. Because let's face it, the vast majority of Christians don't attend a church. We just don't. We don't go to church. We saw what the churches were doing and had done a long, long time ago, begging people for money and interpreting particular things. And then, of course, we know the corruption that exists, and everybody gets the same emails, and they push this agenda or that agenda or make excuses for Israel and 1,000 other things. The rainbow flag waving, you name it. All of that stuff should prove to people that the vast majority of Christians don't even attend church. But to fill out a religious exemption in many cases, in these specific cases, you had to actually have a signed letter from your priest saying that this goes against our congregation and it goes against our practice, and this individual has my permission to not take this because of XYZ. Finding a priest or a pastor or anybody back then to fill out such a letter was so few and far between because so many churches were buying into the lie. I mean, this is the inception of lying. You know, from the movie Inception. In the movie, it's a dream within a dream within a dream within a dream, and they see how far deep in the dreams they can go to ultimately influence an individual's subconscious and then manipulate, again, their decision-making when they're not dreaming in the real world. This is a lie within a lie on a ruling about something that isn't real, about something that doesn't exist, about a measure that was put in place that didn't have to because none of it's real. Now here's what it says at the end of this article. This is their interpretation of why this matters. It says, the chaos and confusion of COVID-19 gave powerful people unprecedented license to curtail people's freedoms, to speak, to congregate, to attend schools, and to exercise religion. Yes, that's all correct. But it was also because COVID-19 doesn't exist. There was no pandemic. It was a script, a fairy tale, and a story that was blindly told to people, and people blindly believed it. It says these restrictions changed the lives of many Christians, but the outcries seemed few and far between, lost under an avalanche of misreported health catastrophes and political scandals. It says the Daily Citizen is grateful that these beleaguered people are getting their day in court and winning. Our constitutional freedoms are rooted in the innate dignity of human beings, bestowed upon us by our Creator God. We should cherish them as blessings and fight for them when they are taken away. Yes, now take it a step further. There is no COVID. That's the biggest part of this here. And that right there again is the aspect of the lie that unfortunately is being perpetuated by those who are still seeking to profit from the lie, although they are on the seeming good side of things, like the wellness company and the Dr. McCulloughs of the world. There is no COVID. It doesn't exist. There was only a set of symptoms that were brought about by 5G tower implementation and individuals taking vaccinations in 2019 and 2020. And then the shedding and electromagnetism that was taking place with all of that. That's all there was. all of that loss of smell, loss of taste, the chronic coughing, that's what all of that was. We were being electrified and magnetized and shed on and transmitted on. It wasn't because people were coughing and sneezing on you. Which, by the way, I should mention this. This is the inception, lie, and diversion of the story, again, at the end of last week that was just briefly covered and then disappeared, that, again, social distancing doesn't matter and that the science on it was fake. Well, as it turns out, social distancing can be a preventative measure from electromagnetism when you're around someone who's been radiated on or poisoned. In a case like that, yes, social distancing matters and does help. Staying away from those people from a physical distance matters because we are electric beings. It's like the closer you get with a pair of scissors in your hand into a wall socket, the further away you are, the less likely you are to be electrocuted. But the closer you move those scissors into those wall socket holes, well, it's Zappo time. So it's no different with real illness because we are electric beings. But again, that's the truth in the matter that is not being told. Again, it's not coughing and sneezing on people. That doesn't transmit anything ever. It has to do with electromagnetism on a constant basis. Now, in that same vein, let me read this. This was a particular post, and I want to say this may have been on Facebook, if I'm not mistaken. It kind of looks like that text. But anyway, this is from a Sonia Wiebe, if I'm saying that right. And here's what they said. Again, it makes sense, and this is kind of a nice summary. It's not anything different necessarily than you've heard me say, but this is from someone else. It says the following, quote, "Well, it's happening. I was chatting with a friend of mine the other day from small town Saskatchewan, and he said their local public health nurse has resigned due to death threats. Her father warned her not to get the COVID shots because he said, quote, 'You don't know what's in them,' unquote. But she was super pro vaccines. So she administered them left and right and center and contacted the seniors in her community to come in and get vaccinated, quote unquote. She was also somewhat infamous for administering immunizations at the school without parental consent. Well, since 2021, seniors in that small community have been dropping like flies. And now 3 years later, people are putting two and two together, and they are upset. Then I heard later of pastors getting death threats for pushing the shots on their congregations for the same reason. So many deaths and side effects. As a side note, if your church is registered under the Canada Corporations Act, it is possible that your pastor or deacon was offered money by the government to get as many parishioners jabbed up as possible. If your church issues receipts for charitable donations, it's registered under the Canada Corporations Act in case you're a church going individual and are wondering if this applies to your particular church. They wrote, and now the rats are jumping ship as well. Health Canada is now saying that they were, quote unquote, not aware and that there was DNA in the COVID vaccines. I have a grade 9 education, and I was aware that in 2020 already there was sketchy DNA in those shots. If I knew, they knew. And every day I hear of a fresh politician coming out and saying the whole COVID thing was handled wrong and the Vax Pass was a bad idea. And they hadn't supported it from the get-go and blah, 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 blah. But to be clear, they knew exactly what they were doing. Nobody who was pushing this agenda, masks, vaccines, lockdowns, etc., was in the dark. I believe there were unsuspecting individuals who got the shots who didn't know, but any healthcare professional, pastor, or politician who was pushing them, or any cop who was enforcing this crap, had been warned by somebody. They said, us anti-vaxxers, quote unquote, have said enough. It's not our job to hold anybody accountable. But those of you who got it because of pressure from your doctor, your family member who is a nurse, your pastor, your boss, whoever, hold those people accountable. This is a terrible, terrible thing that has been perpetuated on the world, and the spin-off effects will go on for years. Never forget. I'm not saying don't forgive, but we cannot forget, or it will happen again. It will take on a different face, but it will happen again. Question everything, unquote. I certainly agree with that, 100%. I honestly, and again, I'm not making excuses for these doctors. I just think that these doctors were brainwashed too. Certainly the ones with individual practices who don't work inside of hospitals. But even so, the ones who work inside of hospitals, many of them are brainwashed because they're brainwashed to follow policy. They're brainwashed to read the emails and then just do what they're told. I think the bigger part of the email is the so-called revenge and or retribution aspect of all of this. This is going to get interesting. It would be interesting to track this statistic if it could be tracked. How many doctor practices on an individual basis among those who dished out the shots close down their practices, sell their practices if they can do that, or flat out move out of the town, city, or even state where they used to live, and maybe pick up a practice somewhere else, and even when approached by someone and asked about how they handled the COVID thing, that they end up lying about it and openly saying something like, "Yeah, I didn't dish them out. There were a lot of problems with them, and I didn't dish any out." And they just flat out become someone else and lie to people, even though that they themselves are jabbed, but they're lying to their new group of patients because they want to keep their practice and they want to keep the money coming in, and they don't want to be unemployed, and they don't want to retire too soon, or 1,000 other reasons. But it's also because of course, image protection. That's really the overarching part. It would be interesting to find out how many doctors are actually doing that. I have no doubt there's death threats. I have no doubt there's threatening emails and that these people are getting them. I'm certain of it. They have to be. The email is the easiest thing you can do. You jabbed my family member, now they're dead. Don't you know what's in these shots? What the hell's the matter with you? I mean, you know, all doctors and certainly pastors are getting flooded with that kind of stuff. No doubt about it. But again, at the end of this message, they openly said, of course, they're going to try something again. They will try some kind of control measure again, which kind of brings this next story into play a little bit as well. I mentioned, of course, that this week is, I think it's the 23rd, if I'm not mistaken, is the so-called day where the WHO is going to scheme and meddle and make the decision that they've already made, or allegedly make it publicly. So we should keep an eye on that. Again, I don't think it's a psyop. I don't think it's fake. We know how the doctors and the nurses in the hospital conglomerates and all of the private organizations in the United States handled the last 4 years. We know how they handled the mask wearing, the mandates, the social distancing, and the shot taking, all of which has been debunked. And I hate to use the word debunked, but you get what I'm saying. All of it was fraudulent. And unfortunately, there are still people who run these giant corporations who don't think that. An individual recently testified, I believe last week, saying that there was no evidence for social distancing. And just like that, the implementation of all of the distancing practices are forgotten. It's all gone. There's no "I'm sorry." There's no "we got it wrong" from the employers. There's no "you can have your job back because you refused to socially distance." There's no "whoops, you were manipulated onto stepping onto the magic circles and the magic stickers that were on the floor that were going to keep you safe from an illness that doesn't exist, from people who have no symptoms of being ill whatsoever. Because remember, asymptomatic is not a thing either. There's no apology. There's no recognition. There's just a giant blanket statement that gets made by somebody that says all of it was horse shit, and then everybody goes, back to normal. We're all back to normal now. Don't forget the fact that everybody was manipulated to death over the last 4 years. Ignore all of that, because this person now has come out and said, well, social distancing is fake. So there's this, again, on the so-called eve of this world pandemic or world pandemic treaty here. The WHO moves to seize control of the global food supply. This is from Slay News. It says the WHO, the United Nations Health Agency, quote unquote, is pushing to establish an alliance that will allow the unelected organization to monitor and control the food supply of sovereign nations around the world. So, who needs an FDA when you have the WHO? And that, of course, is called global government. That's the entire point. It goes on. It says, last week, the WHO Alliance for Food Safety concluded its first meeting where bureaucrats laid out plans for establishing global governance of the food supply. It says the health agency is pushing to establish an alliance that will allow the unelected organization to monitor and control the food supply of sovereign nations around the world. Globalists convened in the meeting to discuss the implementation of the WHO global strategy. This, too, is a plan that they have, apparently, under the guise of what's called the WHO Global Strategy for Food Safety, 2022 through 2030. So there's their timeline again. They're telling you what they want to do. They're telling you the timeline in which they want to do it. It's no different than any pandemic treaty. They want to get all private agencies and government to squeeze local businesses and box stores and you name it, grocery stores, all those conglomerates, to basically do whatever it is that they say needs to be done. If a product needs to be eliminated, they eliminate the product. If the person needs to be manipulated into doing a particular thing, then they will manipulate the person into doing the particular thing. Specifically the employee, certainly the management. And then they go right through the entire business, controlling how the entire business operates. And of course, it's the people at the very top who get paid to go through with these kinds of plans, while the everyday employee at the bottom gets manipulated to the point of them becoming ill, if not dead. And then, of course, if they're non-compliant, well, they just replace them with a robot. And that's the way that goes. Back to some jab-related stuff, though, here. I'm over on Dr. Makis's Substack page, which, by the way, I highly recommend subscribing for free, and you can subscribe for free and read all of his articles. Dr. Mike Yeadon, he is also on Substack. In fact, Dr. Mike Yeadon gave a shout-out to our Michigan business friend owner, who goes by Agent, hang on just a minute, I always forget the exact number. They are also on, they're also on Substack, Agent 131711. And Agent over there wrote an article about ivermectin and why the giant push for ivermectin and the purpose of ivermectin and its history and its interesting production aspects, certainly. And again, it's not that ivermectin isn't helpful. I'm living proof that ivermectin is certainly helpful, certainly for diverticulitis and poison ivy and a bunch of things. But also the point that Agent makes in her Substacks, which is chemtrails.substack.com, is that ivermectin shouldn't be taken on a constant basis, and unless, of course, a person has cancer or some other massive ailment, but it shouldn't be taken as a preventative medicine. It shouldn't be taken on a constant basis and swallowed like Skittles because you're about to get on an airplane where people are going to shed on you. Again, I can't help but think of Dr. Tenpenny. Same thing. She would openly discuss in her episodes about swallowing a bunch of hydroxychloroquine and ivermectin before she got on an airplane to travel to a conference from point A to point B, and she always carried it with her, and she was always taking it even when she wasn't sick. This is not recommended. This is not a good idea. Again, you don't take drugs if you can avoid it at all, which is great, but you certainly don't take it as a massive preventative medicine if certainly you don't have to, and no one has to. So that's one of the major points that she makes in the article too. And Mike Yeadon gave her a shout out for that, and he said, yeah, there are some good questions that need to be asked here. Why the giant push for ivermectin at the very beginning? Again, most people didn't get sick. Most people didn't get quote-unquote COVID because it doesn't exist. Remember, again, they were scaring the elderly. They were saying, well, kids don't get it, but the elderly do. And all those narrative shifts and all of that story changing that was happening on a constant basis, it was all designed to confuse, which should be, again, the red flag that everybody should take a step back and say, wait a minute, how about we just do what we were normally doing? How about we get outside, we eat right, we exercise, and we just kind of do the normal stuff that normal people do, instead of swallowing a bunch of drugs and so on and so forth. But either way, wanted to give a shout out to both of them. Again, Mike Eden's remarkably objective, and he'll provide a very basic comment on a particular thing and say, I have to keep reading this, but this does beg a lot of very good questions. And he's right, it does. But this was from Makis's Substack page, and it was titled Winter of Died Suddenly, High School Sports Coaches and Other Athletic Coaches Whose Deaths Were Unexpected, quote unquote. 65 coaches who died recently, COVID-19 mRNA vaccine mandated jobs. Again, it's a paid subscription to read a bunch of his stuff, and certainly read it in its entirety. But yeah, so I'm not gonna pay him to read it. But either way, I do want to finish with this. I want to finish the episode with this. This was a video again on the Vax bus. And this was a woman by the name of Tracy who was in the U.S. Army, and she was injured, it says, by the anthrax vaccines. So give this a listen, and then I'll jump in at the end and give you my 2 cents very briefly and round out the episode. So here we go in 3, 2, 1.
Hi, my name is Tracy. I'm 46 years old.
And you were in the military?
I was in the Army. And in 2003, I was getting ready to deploy in support of Operation Iraqi Freedom. And prior to leaving for deployment, we received 12 vaccines, including 5 rounds of anthrax, polio, typhoid, yellow fever, Hep A, among others. And upon receiving my first dose of anthrax, I remember I had a melting feeling where I just felt like I was melted to the floor. I briefly remember gasping for air. As I understood, I also had full body convulsions. When I came to, the sergeant in charge had helped me up in a chair, and I'd asked him what had happened. He told me that I had an adverse reaction and that they see about 1 of these in every group that they vaccinate. At the time, he told me to sit in the chair. After 30 minutes, if I felt better, I could go on my merry way. And that's exactly what I did. I had a war to prepare for. And really at the time, I didn't think anything more of it. Later, I discovered that actually that incident, that anaphylactic episode, was never put into my medical files. And in fact, I continued to receive 4 more rounds of anthrax leading up to deployment. And one thing I read, I know in RFK Jr.'s book, The Real Anthony Fauci, one thing that I discovered is that after 2001, they had expedited the anthrax vaccine, overriding regulatory practices for the laboratory and product safety of that vaccine. Well, we fast forward 14 years later, and that's really where I began my struggle with chronic pain and chronic fatigue syndrome. At the time that I got ill, I was working full-time. I had a great career. I had a 1-year-old, a 4-year-old, and I lived a very healthy lifestyle. I ate organic, I drank filtered water, I was aware of environmental toxins and trying to reduce their exposure. At the time, my kids were in daycare. They picked up all sorts of illnesses, and my youngest had brought home a stomach bug. It was passed around to the entire family, and I was the last one to get it. But the thing is, I never fully recovered from that stomach bug because I experienced a full fatigue, full body pain after that incident, and I never have recovered since. And I had eventually led up to me giving up my career. I had to give up all my hobbies, all activities, and really just parenting as a mother to young children and as a wife. And so through this journey, one thing that I had learned is that disease takes years to develop. And that stomach bug that I experienced, it was really like a catalyst or a tipping point to opening up a terror of infections for me, including multiple viral, bacterial, and parasitic infections all at once. I had heavy metal toxicity, mold toxicity. So my internal terrain had been disrupted due to the various toxins that I had been exposed to. I believe that anaphylaxis that I experienced in 2003 had really damaged my neurological system. And my exposure to multiple experimental vaccines and their adjuvant properties are really what plague my health today. And, I know I'm not alone in this, because I know that NCO that day had told me that they see about one of these adverse reactions in every group. So it really makes me question how many other service members are continuing to experience ill health years later.
So today, what would these vaccine effects still affect? How are they affecting you today?
Well, I continue to struggle with chronic pain and chronic fatigue syndrome. I've worked with various practitioners, and there's no answer. Nobody can give me answers. Nobody can say that this is the cause of it, and this is why, and this is what we need to do in order to get you healthy. I seen the best of the best, and I'm continuing to work through it, but I still struggle every day. I still suffer from pain and from fatigue, and my health just hasn't been the same. And while I cannot definitively point the finger and say that vaccine had done that, I do know that my body was compromised.
So, have you stopped vaccinating now?
Absolutely. No more vaccines. No, not unless they can prove the real safety behind these vaccines. I will not, and my children, I have learned through this experience that unless there's real safety data to show for the vaccines, will I get them vaccinated. But from what I've learned and everything that I've read and that I've researched, there's not a single vaccine on the market that I feel comfortable giving my children.
Did you take the COVID shot?
Absolutely not.
Did you get COVID?
I did.
And how did you treat that?
I did great. I got COVID 2 times. I used Chinese herbs, and I used nutrients and supplements like vitamin A and vitamin D and vitamin C and zinc and iodine. And I actually had some remarkable results. I think I had, there were about 3 days, the first time I got COVID, there were about 3 days that were a little bit rough, but I got through it and I was okay. And I actually was very resilient, which is incredible for me because I get sick quite often. And so I was able to fight through that. The second time I got it, within 24 hours, I was able to fight it off, taking my nutrients and my supplements. And I wouldn't have done it any other way. My husband also got COVID, and I used the same protocols that I used on him. He also had some outstanding results.
And neither of you have blood clots or myocarditis or pericarditis?
No,
Heart attack?
no.
Anything else you want to add to your story?
That I believe that there's a better way to these vaccines in terms of the safety protocols that are being done, more research, and that I don't think it's okay to have cocktails of vaccines as well, because you don't know, they're not studied for their effects on how these vaccines interact with each other. And while in the military, it was definitely, there were numerous concoctions. I would call them cocktails. And so there needs to be further study on what those vaccines, when you're doing multiple vaccines at what time, what that does on the long-term health of individuals.
Okay, I'm going to make my comments brief here. Bless her heart. I'll start off there. Bless her heart. I don't wish that on anybody. But she's still not awake yet. And she still doesn't understand, nor has probably been presented the information, certainly the information that I've brought up here regarding Sabrina Wallace's work and government's open paperwork and admission on the nanotech and all of the poison in the metal that is in all of these shots, dating back decades, getting it in people, and then having these people perpetually sick over the course of time. And then when society introduces a new name for a so-called illness, when that person gets sick, because they've already been poisoned over the course of years, they believe that they have the thing that the news is talking about, i.e. COVID. So, again, 12 vaccinations before she went to Iraq, and she still doesn't know for certain if it's the vaccines or not, so she says. Well, those dots are on top of each other. I mean, they don't even need connecting. So there's that point. The next aspect of it, of course, is that she mentioned earlier about her child coming home with a stomach bug. No, there's no such thing as a stomach bug. There's poisoning from vaccines, there's poisoning from food, and there's electromagnetism. That's about it. So if something was being passed around everybody, that should be the indicator that everybody has a compromised immune system. Because again, let's face it, if you have a woman who is a mother and a wife who was in the army, and she was, or whatever branch, but she was jabbed multiple times, she has a compromised immune system. So she's going to get ill from a hat dropping on the floor. I mean, it's not even going to matter what particular illness or parasite is being ingested or injected into someone around her. She's likely to get ill anyway. So there's that. Again, she openly said that she had quote-unquote COVID twice. Well, she didn't have COVID twice. She had symptoms of having a compromised immune system twice. It just happened under the fake story of COVID. So I wanted to play her story because that's just general vaccine injury right there. That's what that is. Again, so far she doesn't seem to have heart damage, so she says, but she has chronic fatigue. Well, chronic fatigue has a lot to do, unfortunately, with heart rate. And it has a lot to do with respiratory capacity and the combination of those two organ systems working together. And if it's being slowed down for any particular reason, it could very well be vaccine injury. Certainly so. In her case, I mean, my God. But she raises a good point too. How many other veterans are damaged permanently from all of the shots? Again, I've played those videos on the war videos of these military individuals that are all standing in line. Of course, they're all wearing the same clothes. They're taking one step forward, and they're all being injected. One injection in both arms at the exact same time, and then they're in another line. One injection in both arms at the same time, and then they're off in another line. And in one of the videos, there was a female, again, army, military, some branch of our government, of our military anyway, and she was standing in line, and she either received one or none of the shots, and she proceeded to lose consciousness and pass out. And she passed out, and she leaned up against the side of a wall or a refrigerator or whatever it was in this room, and honest to Christ, as she's on the ground, recovering from waking up, she's injected with at least one or two more injections right then and there on the spot, as she's on the ground. And those weren't shots to wake her up. She was awake. She was crying. But she was just injected with the rest of it just to get it out of the way, just to get it done with. It's poisoning. There's no way around it. Ladies and gentlemen, thank you for listening as always. I'll catch you on Wednesday. Peace. Thank you for listening to American Education FM. Make sure and check out AmericanEducationFM.com for more information. Take care and God bless.